Hello, my name is Maryanne Bora from HIMSS, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for taking time to be here today. We have an exciting program for you, but before we get started, I do want to highlight a few things so that you'll know how to participate in today's event. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application engagement tools you can use. All of these engagement tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. If you need technical support during today's event, click the question mark icon in the navigation menu at the bottom of your screen, where you'll find answers to frequently asked questions, or you can type your question in the Q&A widget to the right of the media player. You can use that same box to submit questions for our speakers at any time. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up with you offline. Engage with today's content and let us know how you're feeling with the emoji reactions. If you miss anything, don't worry. You'll receive an email within 24 hours with a link to the on-demand recording when it becomes available. So now let's get started with today's program, Agents of Impact, Deploying Agentic AI for Scalable Healthcare Innovation, sponsored by CitiusTech. Our speakers today are Shujah Das Gupta, Vice President, Medical Technology at CitiusTech, and Harshit Shah, Chief Technology Officer at Kyruus Health. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll hand over to Shujah to begin our presentation.
Thank you very much, Maryanne. And Harshit, thank you for joining me today for the session. So today we wanted to walk you through our experience in scaling AI within a healthcare environment. So we would like to cover it from four different points of views. One is to talk about some of the key use cases in the near term where there is potential for agentic AI to be deployed. Some of our collective learnings across Kyruus Health as well as CitiusTech, where we've had the opportunity to work with several of our clients about deploying AI across multiple work streams. Some of the key learnings from these experiences, as well as what we see as near-term outlook around agentic AI deployment within a healthcare setting. So with that, I'd like Harshit maybe to give a quick background about his experience at Kyruus.
Right. Thanks, Shujah. And thank you for HIMSS team providing this opportunity and platform to share some of our learning at Kyruus Health. And more importantly, the inflection point we are in, especially in the healthcare, with advent of Gen AI and technology, which is rapidly accelerating anything compared to any other time in the history for healthcare. Just to give you a little bit about my background, my career has been spanned and shaped by building an AI models at scale at multiple major cloud providers, be it AWS or be it at Microsoft, and then applying these tools in one of the toughest industry like healthcare. Not only my previous experience at Spring Health, but even at Kyruus Health as well. Now at Kyruus Health, I get to combine on both sides of the equation. I understand how underlying the technology and the AI model works, but also deploying that in a regulated and sensitive environment. That dual lens helps me to think about pragmatic way on how we can apply the technology, where we don't chase the hype, but we work back from the customer and think about the AI and the technology as an enabler to provide value to patients, to the provider, and to the payer, all three sides of the equations that we serve at Kyruus Health. So I'm super excited to share some of my observations and learning as well. And Shujah, in your role at the CitiusTech, you are uniquely positioned to look at the adoption across wide portfolio of companies as well. So ready for the fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Harshit. And just to add, at CitiusTech, we have a very unique point of view, given that we work with a very broad spectrum of customers across the healthcare ecosystem. And over the last 15 years, we've seen adoption of new technology in multiple phases. So starting with cloud infrastructure coming into healthcare gradually over between 2010 to 2020, seeing the advent of digital health, right, particularly through COVID with patient engagement solutions, and now seeing the impact and the potential of AI as it evolves to reimagine and redefine healthcare ecosystems. And we've had the opportunity to work with close to 50 customers over the last year and a half about helping shape their AI strategies. So very excited for this conversation today.
Yes.
So one of the challenges that we've seen, Harshit, is around what is a good use case for agentic AI, right? Because AI as a concept is fairly nebulous, right? So you ask AI folks for a definition of AI, you'll hear five different things from five different people. And when a good starting point that we thought was a report that was put out by Bessemer a few months ago, which talked about what are the use cases that would be good candidates for early adoption of agentic AI at scale. Would love to hear your thoughts on this based on what you've seen at Kyruus Health.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic questions. And I had a fortune to attend Bessemer's and Bain's leadership offsite few months back, based out of New York, where they brought in the leaders and experts in the healthcare and in the technology space, including the likes of Anthropic and so forth, and AWS to talk about how to apply AI technology in the healthcare across the spectrum, be it pharmaceutical, be it payer and plan business, be it a provider business. And the framework that you are showing on the screen, I found it extremely useful. When we think about technology, you shouldn't start with a technology and then look for a problem. You should start from the problem and existing workflow and then apply technology to streamline and apply to that. So I think that framework of these 60 so jobs to be done is very, very important, where when we think about the cost curve that is impacting the healthcare, if I am a chief medical officer at a health system, I'm like worried about fixing the HVAC system versus providing a digital experience to the patients that we serve, or I am looking into how to reduce the burnout that is impacting all my back office admin workflow, right? And these are the set of things as a task are not gonna go away. These are still needed, but how do you apply selectively and with a clear ROI in terms of Gen AI reducing that burden is going to be very, very important. Similarly, if I'm a plan where my entire business model is going to rely on how efficiently claim processing happens, revenue cycle management happens, there are again several dozen jobs to be done or the existing workflow which are already there in the ecosystem and how you streamline using technology. And same applies to pharma. I think one of the fantastic opportunity with Gen AI where it is able to find needle in a haystack kind of analogy. And when we think about the research and development that needs to happen on pharma with a large data set and pinpointing that is what is effective, is going to be much more easily possible now. So I do expect from the drug discovery to validation to analysis, etc., cycle is going to just rapidly expand between now and in future. So everybody should be thinking about it. And I found this framework that Bessemer kind of put together as their AI index extremely useful to drive some of the strategy and the decisions within the Kyruus Health as well.
That's great, Harshit. And just from our experience, so we had the opportunity to work with different profiles of healthcare IT organizations, and a couple of things stood out for us as we looked through the use case. And these use cases resonated very closely with the early adopters of both Gen AI and Agentic AI solutions in across our base. So a couple of things that stood out for us is one, a lot of these use cases are fairly discrete in nature, which means they have reasonably well-defined metrics that are used to evaluate the performance.
Okay.
The second thing is the workflows themselves tend to be fairly repeatable.
Yes.
So they are discrete workflows. In some respects, a lot of these were also candidates for RPA-based automation. Has that been your experience as well, Harshit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's where the part about, as you rightly called it out, where existing workflow will have associated metrics. And when we think about measuring the impact of the AI, being a data-driven or metric-driven is equally important, right? And this goes back to not chasing the hype part of it. But yeah, you are correct, where traditional automation that was typically RPA based, and it is still valuable and going to be valuable. Now you can think about with advent of agentic AI that, hey, what agent can do the things which is mundane, repeatable, etc., and then human job can be uplifted in terms of focusing on a higher value add, right? So this has continued to happen throughout the history of mankind with new tool gets discovered and that drives the efficiency and that allows people to focus on the next problem at hand kind of thing. So as the saying goes that say, hey, AI is not going to replace the job. The people knowing the AI is gonna be better positioned to do the job compared to the people who don't know or doesn't adopt the new learning curve about the AI. So yeah, completely agree with you, which is these are fairly well understood and discrete workflows, and that's why it is uh, advantageous to approach that way and apply the technology and AI to streamline many of these workflows.
Yeah. So in our experience with RPA, one of the challenges that we ran into was
Mm,
while the business processes were reasonably well defined,
mm,
um, very often we had to deal with a fairly heterogeneous
yeah,
mix of source and target systems, right, which needed to be integrated with.
yeah,
And that's actually where we ended up seeing a certain amount of brittleness in the workflows if you had to suddenly expand the requirement beyond a predefined set of source and target systems. Right? Just to give you
mm,
an example, one of the use cases which often causes provider burnout is taking notes, transcribing them, and inserting them into an EHR into a specific field.
yeah,
Now, with RPA, the process was well understood. But if you had to, let's say, integrate with different EHRs where you had to enter these notes, every EHR had a slightly different UI layout. Every
mhm,
EHR would have maybe support some degree of user personalization, which would cause maybe the screens or the elements to be shifted. And when we got into actually operationalizing this at scale, that's where the cracks started to appear, right? Where we would suddenly have to go back, revisit the workflows, and essentially rethink the entire use case itself and whether it was a candidate. These are
mhm,
some use cases where we find that because agents have a much broader intelligence about the task that needs to be done, we're
mhm.
finding it to be a good candidate to essentially augment RPA wherever you had not only
Yeah,
do you have a well-defined business process, but you have to work across potentially multiple data sources and multiple systems.
correct. No, completely agree. I think this is uh, the point that you are bringing it up, where the foundation of any of these workflow automation and supplemental introducing the agentic AI has to be that data foundation, right? Like we went through the similar journey as well at Kyruus Health. The good part for us, though, even before the long before the AI boom, for us, the data foundation has been the core philosophy. When Kyruus Health started, it started with solving that important problem and helping patient find a doctor by structuring the messy healthcare data, be it different set of EHRs as you are calling it out, or structuring the data in a way which can allow the find a doctor or a search capability on top of that. So we continue to focus on that, having the structured data, having the normalized data that we prepare on every single day as part of our data foundation, data pipeline, etc., has allowed us to build the workflow which are trustworthy, build the workflow which has the right guardrails in terms of safety and removing the biases, etc., to power the multimodal search to find the right care, etc., etc. Right. So I think you are correct that the fragility on RPA plus agentic AI automation will be there if underlying data sources are not well matured. And I would strongly encourage any leader in a healthcare domain or engineering technology team in a healthcare domain to not underestimate the readiness and preparedness of the data that is needed to unlock any of these opportunity. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It has to be a constant focus for the team. But once that groundwork is kind of laid down, a lot of unlocking that can happen on top of it as well.
Terrific. So, one of the things that we wanted to also talk a little bit about, Harshit, and we'd love to understand your experience at Kyruus, because I think Kyruus, at least from our point of view, really has been one of the pioneers in adopting all aspects of AI at scale, right? And I think that's really seen in some of the outcomes that you've that have been obviously mentioned publicly, but I'm sure are part of your strategic roadmap as well.
Yeah.
And in terms of the key focus areas for technology leaders who are considering implementing generative AI or agentic AI at scale within their organizations,
Mhm.
particularly from the engineering side of the organization, we'd love to hear your experience at Kyruus and how that's kind of shaped your thinking about, and what would be, potentially a learning that you would like to share with other industry leaders.
Yeah, no, great questions. And again, this is an evolving area. So I would highlight some of the way we approach our AI strategy at Kyruus Health. And then as you can see on the screen on the slide, we structured our AI strategy on these 5 pillars. And I will touch based on several of those. But this is not the only way. So I think as part of today's discussions and engagement from the audience and other leaders, would like to hear what approaches have worked for them. And Shujah, you also have a vantage point of 40, 50 Protco company that CitiusTech kind of works with, and then what has been successful patterns there as well. But to answer your question, first and foremost, when we think about Gen AI, when in my observation, there has been a few buckets where either it's a top-down mandate coming from board of directors or a CEO to do in a certain XYZ way. And that can help, but that is falling short on what is needed to have a comprehensive positioning and a plan and a North Star in terms of the AI strategy. At Kyruus Health, we focused on at a broader level, not only the pillars that allows us to have Gen AI in our products, which is external customer impacting and user facing part of it, but internal productivity as well. This is where the opportunity on engineering, coding, as well as the other functional workflow that can be automated comes into play. To give you a highlight on some of those things where uh, I mean, the engineering team at Kyruus had access to GitHub Copilot for over 2 years now, right? And I'm sure in my peer group in the industry, talking with them, they continue to struggle on the adoption and usage and applicability of uh, engineering toolset for several reasons. After the initial excitement and the hype, the impact of what it can do on a day-to-day software development life cycle or improving the engineering velocity kind of tapers off. We noticed that as well. But couple of things happened. I think it is important as a leader to provide the framework where a lot of learnings are happening and the help from the subject matter experts are also happening. Saying it differently, 4 years back, number of people in the world who can understand the transformer architecture was very limited set. Now with the Gen AI, I think pretty much every engineer needs to have the skill set on how they do prompt engineering, how they interact with agentic framework is going to be part and parcel of it, right? So we went through that journey of rolling it out, Claude CL, Anthropic Claude CLI to our engineering cohort. We had people do several brown bags to highlight their experiences, what is working, what is not working well. We closely work with some of the partners or vendors that we have leveraged, be it Copilot, be it Anthropic, be it AWS Bedrock, to provide our feedback and think about on the roadmap what is coming and then rolling it out. And then we also focused on quantitative measurement of the impact as well. To give you an example where we saw that on engineering side, we were able to have anywhere from 20 to 25% improvement on our cycle time on how quickly the PRs are getting checked. It also reduces the burden on the developers to do the plan and action. On the specific examples, one of the engineer in InfoSec was able to automate the evidence collection that have to happen as part of every audit cycle to have SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, right? That these things would have taken weeks for somebody to do it. Now he was able to do in 4 hours pretty much. Similarly, we went through a project where we had been putting on a back burner to do re-architect or paying the tech debt of rewriting from version A of the framework to version B of the framework, and leveraging leveraging Claude CLI and Agentic prompts. Team was able to do that in half a sprint. Right, we were 80% there. So again, the technology is not going to be perfect. You continue to have human in the loop. The understanding of the system overall and the customer context is important, but if done right, it is extremely efficient uh, productivity boost as well, right? So Shujah, I would love to hear from you as well on what have you seen in the practices that CitiusTech is leading.
Sure. Well, thanks, Harshit. That's a really helpful background. So I think for CitiusTech, it's been interesting for us to see how different organizations have approached AI. And it when we first started with AI conversations, right, it was primarily an engineering-led initiative. So it started with engineers pushing net new technology into the organization. And we found a lot more resistance from other functions groups who may not have been as fluent or as familiar with the technology. So, for example, the first wave of Copilot or GitHub Copilot adoption, there was a lot of pushback, primarily from the legal and infosec teams. What happens to our data? How do we address this as a part of our contract structures if we are using these tools? Biggest change we've seen maybe over the last 6 months is actually now everybody understands the value of AI and the ability to not only accept newer technologies, the appetite to integrate them, but also the impact of them being outside engineering groups alone has
Yes.
been, I think, quite different for us, right?
Yes.
So now we're seeing much broader set of functions use it.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just curious to see if this was resonates with you, Harshit, as well.
Yeah. You are spot on. I think the adoption, the openness, and uh, the set of scenarios on other functional role, be it legal, be it people operations, be it data operations, customer support, etc. We, in fact, had been very deliberate to drive strategies and having a plan in terms of how we can leverage Gen AI on those functions as well. I think the couple of things that we did was, in my bias view, was also useful, where we had several of the tech fest or code fest that kind of happening across the company as well on a regular frequency, which allow the greenfield ideas and then engineering pairing up with non-engineering team members as well. So though several of these tools are providing low code kind of functionality, but you still need some of the engineering skill set in terms of either Python, or if you are using Google ADK, like how to piece together set of things, right? So putting together a team member who has a very good definition of the problem that needs to be solved with help and support from the engineering team as part of the code fest allowed us to drive the adoption in other function area as well. We also saw the opportunity to leverage, like right now on the business productivity side, your company is gonna be either leveraging Microsoft Office 365 ecosystem or using Google Workspace ecosystem. We are Google Workspace, and we were able to roll out Gemini Enterprise across the board as well. And that has also driven the efficiency on how people do their work. I mean, we measure, as I mentioned, like everything that we do, we have a structured way of measuring it. And we were able to see on an average 2 to 3 hours of time saving for every employee at Kyruus Health. And when you do some total of that, it is a significant amount of savings that can happen on the company's bandwidth to do more important work as well. So you are correct that say, hey, for any company, this is a competitive advantage. Staying on a sideline, resisting, and having a fear of unknown is not gonna be the case, because if you are not moving fast enough, your competitor is gonna left you behind. Your product is gonna left behind. So I think my honest opinion is like, don't wait, try, learn, and continue to iterate on the adoption.
That's great, Harshit. The other change that we've seen in context of the discussions that we've been having is, it used to be a bottoms up approach, right? Where,
Mhm.
as I said, it's engineering led, so you have to sort of get the organizations to buy in.
Yeah.
I think now it's much more of a top down approach, right? So almost
Mhm.
every executive leader that we have spoken to in the last 6 months recognizes that it's almost mission critical to have generative AI or agents as a part of your future strategy, right? Because as you
Mhm.
said, if you're not doing it, somebody else is going to be doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the couple of things that would be really interesting to understand is how did you prioritize the use cases within Kyruus, right, to build trust within the broader ecosystem, and
Mhm.
also how did you measure it, right? How
Mhm.
did you try to define the ROIs that you were getting?
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question. So yes, I agree and acknowledge that either of this approach, whether it is just a bottoms up without having the sponsorship and support, or just the top down where it is defined as a goal without the associated structure around it, is not going to fly. Right? Both of them will hit a roadblock at some point of time. So thinking about the model that has worked at Kyruus Health and at other places where I have led the strategy for AI. It is combination of A, focusing on first and foremost providing the which clear clarity on what is allowed and what is not allowed, right? So as an example, at Kyruus Health, we had formed AI steering committee, which is a cross-functional, including legal, finance, etc., and which provided a very structured way on how to go about evaluating a tool, allowing a tool from initial POC all the way to the rollout to the broader audience within the company as well. We also, as part of that POC, encourage the driver to define a clear set of ROI or the output metrics as well. As an example, we looked at a Firebase to reduce the cycle time from initial idea of doing the UX design and having a working prototype kind of ready, and we were able to do the A/B testing in terms of that. Say, hey, without adoption of the tool, this is what the cycle time would have looked like, and with adoption of tool, this is what the cycle time will look like. In some cases, as a customer support function, which is outside of the engineering, uh, it is very right when we think about building that trust with the end user as part of your customer support function is so much important. This is where the quality, the sentiment analysis, the response time, and reducing that burden is very, very important. And we were able to do that in our customer support function as well, right? So I think, as you initially called out, Suja, that while those jobs to be done are very well defined kind of workflow, apply that mindset in the internal workflow as well, that on every function job, be it finance, be it data operations, be it customer support, the jobs to be done are kind of well understood and defined, and ability to measure that before and after in terms of adoption of the tool is the one way we approached it, and it has fairly worked well for us as well.
Oh, that's great, Harshit. Thank you for sharing that insight with us. I'll move ahead to the next slide, which kind of talks about what has been our collective sort of understanding of learnings from early implementers. And some of it is also iterative in nature. So, starting with early adopters of AI models in clinical and operational workflows, then moving to generative AI, and now the emphasis really is on agentic AI deployment at scale.
Mhm.
Some of the key areas that we've seen time being spent, or some of the takeaways, right, of in terms of impact, as well as how what needs to be a focus area upfront, right, that you need to
Mhm.
spend time in uh, before you start really coding or start working towards the end goal, right?
Mhm.
And this may not be an exhaustive list, of course, right? There are several other considerations that come in. But the first thing I wanted to maybe understand from you at Kyruus, Harshit, was how did you guys think about the foundation model that you
Yeah.
wanted to use, right? What went into that? Were there any experiences that you'd like to share?
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question. So I think the foundational models, especially the LLMs, which are available both commercially as well as on the open source, is such an important part of going through and deciding on the solutions or the workflow that is being implemented for several reasons. Like first and foremost, I think no model is perfect. And as we have seen, it is rapidly kind of changing as well. The sophistication that we might have seen in GPT model 2.0 versus the 5.0 is a day-night kind of difference. Similarly, on Anthropic's Sonnet model between 4.5, 4.7, and now we see day and night difference as well. So when we thought about the model selection, we put together several set of tenets which are important to us. First and foremost, in healthcare, you cannot be heuristic based, right? Like the recommendation that our product or a search engine will be doing to the end user based on their interest and the query cannot be hypothetical. It has to be grounded in the truth. So how do we remove or reduce the biases, hallucination, and how do we have a golden data set which allows us to increase the confidence level was an important part of it. When we think about the technical architecture, we also were aware that you cannot build your implementation on a given foundational model. You need to have scalability or plug and playability in your technical architecture because these foundational models are going to change between now and in future. How easily you can replace when the newer or a better model comes across was important part of us. The third part on the model selection that we spend several time, which is it is okay to get started, and then I see the pattern where the companies or the products are implementing something without thinking through the scalability of that. So this is an evolving field where the cost and performance of model has to be important part of the selection for the model as well, right? So we were able to do comparison between model A and B and C, and then having the pluggable architecture, we're able to continue changing that as well, right? So I think a lot of things kind of goes into on the model selection, but what is important, just like using the right cloud infrastructure on what are the criteria that are non-negotiable for your selection, same needs to apply on the foundational model as well.
No, that's great insight, Harshit. I think that's one of the things that we've learned as we've talked to different customers. Is a lot of people have said, "I wish we'd spend more time upfront thinking about what's the right model to use, and thinking about the broader set of considerations before committing to one over the other."
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then I think the data governance, I think you've alluded to already, I think is really a mission critical activity, right, to go through. And again, would love to hear about how you approach this at Kyruus.
Yeah, so I mean, at Kyruus Health, we process petabyte of data every single month. So I think the size and scale that we operate was already before like the hype of Gen AI was critical for us to invest into our data hygiene. So when you think about it, is the models are going to operate within that context. When you think about the data governance, from my point of view, I think the two parts which are involved. First and foremost, data is the differentiating asset for any given company, right? The foundational models are trained on the knowledge of the world, which is non-differentiated between product A and product B. But the data assets for us, Kyruus Health, over the last decade plus that we have been in the business, we have a very in-depth understanding of how the care access platform works, how the provider search works, what is the clinical taxonomy look like for every provider, and leveraging some of those domain specific information, those semantic normalization to apply, as an example, RAG pattern on top of the foundational model was very, very important for us to kind of factor in. The other part of it, which is, hey, the world is changing. Some of the tasks where you were able to trace it back to the actors, those actors are changing. It's not only going to be human, your agents are actors as well. So how do you attribute the activity, data governance, and the isolation that might be needed on the agentic AI workflow is also going to be very important.
Perfect. Yeah, I think this again just the data governance piece is, again, just a highly repeatable challenge that we see across different organizations. And healthcare data is unstructured, is generally tends to be fairly messy to ingest at scale. So yeah, any the effort made to sort of normalize and make the data ready to consume has had a very material impact on the success or failure of several of the pilot initiatives that we've seen.
Yes. Yes, no, completely agree. We went through a multi-quarter project to consolidate our data management under one tech stack, right? After doing that, it allows us to implement the solution much faster way, because now we can apply the same pattern repeatedly.
Great. I think the next 2 points, the change management and ROI, are kind of correlated in some respects, right? But I think the change management, as I mentioned earlier, initially was really more of an engineering-led activity, right? How do we train our engineers to use tools effectively, right? And to use it in a sustained way across the engineering teams. But I think now there's just much a broader set of users who need to be able to consume and use these tools.
Yeah.
And similarly with measuring the ROI, right? And also the usage of the tools. What was the type of investment? Did you have to invest in additional tooling to be able to measure some of these assets? And how did you go about that at Kyruus Health?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So I think, as you rightly call it out, Shujah, it is very, very important to have internal champions, right? Celebrating the successes and also learning from where the things didn't work when a team tried to use XYZ AI tool is very, very important. For us, on one of the tool that we use, and shout out to Jellyfish, where we engage and partner with them, which already was deployed for us to measure our engineering productivity metrics. And they also have a capability using the existing APIs available either from GitHub Copilot or Cursor or Anthropic Claude CLI to measure the productivity or the gains that might be happening with AI tool set as well. So we were grounded and we had baseline in terms of say, hey, what's the world look like before adopting those tools and what's the world look like post adopting those tools. And that was supplemented by taking a corrective actions where we say, hey, if the adoption is blocked due to the any of the impact or the knowledge gap that might be needed, we were able to be selective to bring in the subject matter experts for the team to train on it, know for it, and then adjust their plan accordingly as well. But yeah, you're right. I think this is rapidly evolving and there are off-the-shelf tools available to measure the ROI as well.
Right. I think this for us, right, the whole aspect of change management is extremely important to include as a part of that, because in some respects, it's technology is not a silver bullet in itself, right? You can provide people with the tool, but you also have to understand how to use it. So there is a process of continuous improvement that we found. So organizations that did well, right, with the adoption of these tools also invested in the constant training and upskilling of the usage of these tools, and then identifying power users, right, or internal champions, and creating a flywheel effect where the accomplishments could be presented and showcased across a broad forum of internal users, really led towards more trust in the benefits of the technology, right? Because one is there's a natural resistance to change when something new comes. The second is there is a lot of people have been burned by overhyping or overpromising the results of what can be accomplished, right? So having internal users who were successfully able to showcase quick wins on well understood use cases, I think really have helped organizations who have successfully deployed this at scale be able to leverage those users to build internal trust and confidence. It's because a completely different story of somebody from outside coming in and making a pitch saying, if use my tool, you get a 25% improvement, as opposed to somebody internal showing you that, hey, you know what, I've used it. Here is what I used to do before. Here's what I'm getting now. And that's something we're seeing consistently again. But was that, again, how you approached this at Kyruus Health when you were thinking?
Yes, no, 110%. Like for us, initially, when we had adoption in some of the lower tens or a 20% kind of thing, we had seen, it was not moving the needle. But once we saw the 40% or so adoption curve, as you call it out, having the champions showcasing that work, acknowledging where the things are working well, created that groundswell. And then after that, it was a snowball effect where it was self-fulfilling in terms of being comfortable and or accelerating the adoption as well. And at this point of time, from all the metrics that we are measuring across the board in our engineering workflow, product design workflow, we are having close to 60-70% plus in terms of the adoption usage internally as well. Right.
Wow.
So I think you are absolutely correct that there is a process and there is a timeline that is needed. Investing into that, being deliberate about that, and then giving it enough time in terms of a quarter or multi-quarter is important. Leaving it on its own without the guardrail can get stagnated for a given organization. So I would strongly encourage all leaders to have an opinionated view on how they want to adopt.
Great. Thanks for that, Harshit. The other area where we saw significant changes, right, was on the engineering processes itself. This was more focused on the engineering teams. But when we saw one of the interesting things that we learned, right, was there is measurable, quantifiable impact. But a lot of the development that happens today is agile based. So we also found that there were certain tasks that were getting more impacted than others.
Yes.
So, for example, unit test case writing, product requirement generation, static code analysis, etc., were all tasks that were disproportionately impacted by the adoption of some of these tools. And one of the interesting impacts that it ended up happening was not all the teams were using these tools evenly in the early adoption phase. So it was actually becoming difficult to predict the overall output of the teams, because you had a team that was suddenly performing 50% above in terms of productivity, but another team was maybe a 10% gain. So just normalizing that improvement across the team was a little bit challenging, especially when you're using scaled agile, for example, and building enterprise grade products with distributed teams. So that was really interesting, which some organizations had to work through. And then just in terms of the incremental capacity that was created, right? Some of it was allocated towards new feature development. Some of it was actually redirected towards improving service tools from the engineering team. So in terms of what organizations did with that incremental capacity was also really interesting for us to observe, right? In terms of who did what.
Yes.
And again, as you mentioned earlier, the underlying infrastructure in terms of tooling, in terms of the additional hardening and investment that had to be made, right, to be able to invest in prompt engineering, the traceability aspect, creating workflows that had humans in the loop as a part of the feature sets that you're developing. And lastly, the deployment pipeline were all areas where, again, a lot of thought had to be put in terms of how do you capture and take these improvements all the way through, so that you're actually seeing the benefits at the end, right? And we had a lot of interesting discussions and experiences with different organizations in terms of how they approached it. But in general, the overall ROI that you saw on this was folks who had kind of looked through it from start to finish, as opposed to looking at tactical improvements in a specific, maybe part of the workflow, as opposed to the whole spectrum from the end-to-end use case. So again, would love to hear your experience at Kyruus Health around both the AI infrastructure and maybe changes you saw in the engineering processes.
No, that's very insightful, Shujah. I think we observe similar journey as well, right? Where certain software development workflow, documentation as an example, or test case generation as an example, or doing the migration from framework version A to framework version B, or starting something greenfield, right? Where there is not a lot of context that needs to be created for the prompts for your agentic AI workflow. These were very useful and easy to get off the ground kind of use cases for us, right? So if you try to, we saw that, say, hey, the fidelity of the output or the recommendation were lower when you try to say, hey, go and make code changes, something that has been built 5-8 years in the past as well. right? So I think selecting the use cases or the workflow in your software development lifecycle and being very diligent about it to build the confidence is important part of it. At the same time, I think about it where you brought up a very important point, which is the bandwidth that gets unlocked by adopting the tool. What is happening with that? So this is my personal point of view, and I subscribe to, having worked at Amazon and AWS, is the two pizza team concept of how engineering team gets composed. And I firmly believe that every leader should be thinking about going forward on how do they do their org design. The traditional way of having 6 to 8 engineers as a two pizza team might be changing, where you might have a 3 engineers and a 3 coding agent, which is delivering the same set of roadmap within that charter or that is being defined for them, right? So I think it's a combination of those things. But what is going to happen with all of these things is the cycle time from idea to getting it ready at a production level code is going to significantly reduce. That will allow uh, many companies, many products, many startup founders to rapidly accelerate on the solutions that can be valuable to the humans. And especially in the healthcare, there's a lot of need to that. I think the needle was moved 15, 20 years back when EHR as a mandate and adoption kind of started, which pretty much digitized on the healthcare domain. And when you think about it, all the different workflow we spoke about at the initial like 60 some workflow, each of those are going to be have a lot more ideas and solutions that will come out on what can be solved. And same applies to AI infrastructure as well, right? Which is being in the healthcare domain, taking care of PHI, PII with and without AI is important part of it, but it will become even more important now because a lot more actions are happening on that. The amount of data that is getting generated in the healthcare, last I checked, is second to only manufacturing in the industry, right? So that is a good and a bad thing. Good thing is like more data allows more robustness in terms of your inferences and suggestions on the AI based modeling. But at the same time, it also creates the challenge of having the right oversight, right data partitioning, right security model on top of it as well. And then the last but not least, where MLOps used to be a specialized kind of skill set only to the company which had applied scientists and data scientists, etc. Now it becoming part and parcel of every engineering job function, right? And tools are there and learning modules are there as well to continue monitoring how to have the AI is being performant, thinking about the cost structure of it. You don't want to run away cost, right? Like getting started is okay, but once you put it out in the world, everybody's going to use it. How do you kind of manage the cost curve of the features that your product have kind of built is going to be important part of the infrastructure.
Thank you for that, Harshit. And it's really good to hear real world experience, which has driven your roadmap at Kyruus, right? I think these are very valuable insights for us. Um, the last topic, we wanted to cover was we what is the near-term outlook of agentic AI across the healthcare ecosystem today, right? And this is really more around the role that agents are going to play. We have seen early adoption of AI models. We have seen some degree of generative AI being now becoming a core part of healthcare workflows, but really agents are going to unlock something completely different, right? As we go forward, and it truly has the potential to revolutionize healthcare workflows. And a few thoughts that we kind of wanted to run by you, and also just share what we are seeing collectively as we engage with different stakeholders across the healthcare spectrum, right? So, one is definitely around the adoption across the care continuum. Because one of the big changes that we've seen is where care is administered, right? So it's increasingly moving outside the four walls of the hospital, right? So now there's a push to do it in ambulatory settings, in skilled nursing facilities, in home-based care settings. But that has also created a large amount of overhead in terms of now managing the coordination across these distributed sites. And historically, at least, healthcare has been slower in adopting newer technologies, as is the case with any regulated industry. But it's also not a lot of the systems today. It's a mix of systems that were designed to operate purely within the walls of the hospital versus newer devices, software as a medical device is a good example. You've got digital assets, you've got wearables which suddenly need to be connected. And the effort that is being put into coordination is going to be greatly simplified by what we see from with agents playing a key role in
Yes.
it going forward.
Yes.
And the other areas, of course, the operational tasks, things like ambient listening, entering clinical notes, etc. All of those are operational in nature, and just that incremental capacity to really free up uh, healthcare practitioners from spending time on operational tasks and shifting it to patient engagement, I think, is going to be a big driver, which is going to pull the adoption of agents into healthcare workflows because people are going to ask for it going forward, right? So I think that is one thing that we've seen across providers, medtech organizations increasingly, and that is becoming a core part of software offerings going forward.
Yes. Yes.
Would love to get your feedback or reaction.
No, I think that gets me very, very excited. I don't consider myself expert in a healthcare, but however time I have spent in the healthcare, one thing I have realized is data is messy in healthcare. And this is where, as you called it out, that how do this care continuum workflow kind of come together? The underlying foundation will require a lot of openness in interoperability between the data sources. Because the things, as you rightly call it out, system will have to get connected. And for system to get connected, they need to speak the similar or the same language as well. And the interoperability, having access to a set of systems via API or MCP and agentic workflow is going to be important to build those continuum as well. But yeah, it is what is going to happen that just like have always have happened, that consumerization of the technology in other verticals like food industry, ride sharing industry, etc., is also increase the expectation for patients and members to have their healthcare provider providing similar technology and the solutions as well. We are already seeing that at Kyruus Health. Our core product is healthcare search. And when I think about how the search has evolved from a box and 10 blue links to likes of Perplexity and ChatGPT, where it has evolved as an answer, right? Where it is providing a much more definitive set where user can go and take the next action. So search changing from the result engine to answer engine is what we are already seeing. And I can see the world where it is going to be more of a task engine that say, hey, when I'm searching for my next trip, I'm not just looking for a recommendation from my search engine. I'm expecting it to book the trip for me. Similarly, when I'm searching for, hey, I'm looking for an orthopedic for the knee surgery. It is not only just doing that, it is booking an appointment for me with an orthopedic surgeon as well.
No, and that's also again what we see this playing an important role in scaling the adoption of value-based care models, right? Because one of the big drivers of pain points in value-based care adoption at scale has really been in follow-ups, right? In ensuring that there is coordination across distributed care settings and then being able to create demonstrable value.
Mhm.
And one of the areas where we do a lot of work is on medical imaging, right? And today, there are about 1,200 FDA approved models. About 950 of those today are in the imaging space.
Mhm.
One common pain point has been around who pays for these AI models in production, right?
Mhm.
Because traditionally, a lot of these operate on a fee for service model, right? So you
Yeah.
pay per usage, per instance of that.
Yeah.
With the level of coordination that agents are going to offer, the ability to close the loop, right, and to manage a patient's condition and to demonstrate better outcomes is actually going to be much more streamlined. So, in our mind, this kind of goes hand in hand, right? That
Mhm.
the adoption of agents into these workflows is actually going to help providers close a lot of care gaps and
Yeah.
make sure that there is rapid updates and dissemination of information
Yes.
across distributed healthcare settings, right? And for us, you know, this is also sort of tied into a lot of evolving regulatory requirements where there is an emphasis on demonstrating better healthcare outcomes,
Yes.
right, as a part of your engagements with the patients, right? So at least that's how we see this being one of the drivers of large scale agentic AI adoption in healthcare. Again, from your point of view, Harshit, is this something that you're observing as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, you bring up a very important point, and I think this is where if I have a wish list or a magic wand, I see especially in the healthcare when you think about what happens, like say, hey, right now, uh, the platforms like Hugging Face, which allows the marketplace for the other models for in the open source or anybody to adopt, or Llama models, which is again open source and several organizations host and deploy those models as well. I see a lot of opportunity in healthcare, right? Like that's where Google Health API and the Vertex AI, they have Mad Gamma as a model that we have tried it out. But when you think about the modern model garden facility or the options that they have within that platform, things like that is going to be very, very important, which is healthcare has a very domain specific information. Models can be built, whether it is small language models can be trained and can be distributed in marketplace like this, where it reduces the lifting that might be needed for somebody to use and build the solution on top of it. But what it will require is, as you rightly pointed it out, a compensation model on who pays for the model, right? And I do believe that a new set of ecosystem will continue to get created where the companies which might have years of imaging data, in our case, we have years of claims data, where we provide that as part of the cost transparency compliance requirement for our customers, and we'll be able to create something that is valuable to the customers or other set of developers to build a solution on top of it as well. So I think it is my personal opinion. I think the infrastructure level and the large language model, there are only going to be few players in the world, but there is an entire ecosystem that will get created on top of it to provide the healthcare domain specific modeling as well.
Perfect, Harshit. Thank you for that. And I think the last 2 points, it briefly touched on this already, but we are, I think, anticipating a much more connected ecosystem where agents are going to essentially work as a part of multi-agent workflows, each of them with specific tasks, but some degree of orchestration. We certainly see emerging standards like MCP becoming very relevant to a healthcare setting as the standards evolve. It's still early stage, but clearly it's an evolving standard. We are seeing significant interest in this. We're seeing numerous cloud providers actually providing MCP services to manage cloud infrastructure going forward, and the ability to handle much richer use cases. And that also tying into, like you said, a patient consumerism type of behavior. And this is also largely driven by the fact that patients are experiencing the benefit of working with agents or having agents shape their experience in multiple other areas. It is only natural that they would expect to see it enter a part of how they manage their own health, and eventually sort of enabling more precision or personalized health outcomes in terms of individual patients caring for themselves and adhering to their medication regime or better fitness regimes, whatever be it.
Yes. No, I think both the points that you kind of called it out, like how does the product or a platform gonna evolve in the new world of MCP is gonna be important. Gets me very excited, and more so on the experiences or the personalization that will be possible to do. Right. To give you some examples, like we put together Kyruus Health MCP strategy sometime back. And it was very clear to us that I've been in the software industry, have worked on a cloud or a SaaS products for last 15 plus years kind of thing. REST-based API as an unlocking for a developer to build on top of your SaaS was a norm, say 10 years back. Every single SaaS platform should be thinking about what is their MCP strategy and how they're going to define what are the MCP servers and the client patterns look like is going to be very, very important for the business model, as well as building the integration on top of it as well. And similarly, on the patient side, the simple example where we allow millions of booking of appointment on our platform on every single year. But we also know that not all the providers are online or available to be booked online. And our team had done a pilot and have thought about ways where we are able to do single click on that, say, hey, behind the scene, an agent will be calling that 1-800 number to book an appointment, right? So when you think about the patient experience where somebody is spending minutes and hours to do the task that is agent going to complete, will streamline the experience and will delight the end users as well. So I'm very excited about like the possibility, especially in the healthcare domain, all the advancement in the near to midterm future will have.
Well, thanks for that, Harshit. And lastly, before we take any questions, just wanted to maybe have you present a call to action for technology leaders in the healthcare IT space, just based on your experiences at Kyruus Health.
Again, this is a rapidly evolving space as well. So I think the couple of things I would call it out, which is uh, we already talked about the foundational models are continue to evolve and become more and more sophistication. So build your technical architecture with reason, which have a pluggability, and then can, as the world kind of or the future evolves, it can be easily replaced. Second part, I would greatly emphasize on the talent pool, right? People who are curious, people who are learning, people who are going be well versed on from anywhere from prompt engineering to MLOps are going to be very high in demand everywhere they go across the function. Similarly, the adoption and the effectiveness of AI is only going to be on the underlying data assets that we had. We touched based on that during the discussion today, but it is irrespective of healthcare or non-healthcare domain, and more so in the healthcare, is going to be like focus on your data foundation is going to be important part of it. And last but not least, which is like say, hey, future proofing your product by enabling that on ready for model context protocol is going to be equally important as well. So again, I mean, these are some of the things that keeps me up at night. I'm sure there are more to it as well. But if you are just starting your AI journey, I would strongly suggest to keep these call to actions in mind.
No, thank you for that, Harshit, and really appreciate you sharing your insights on this through this discussion. And I'll hand it over to Maryanne to see if there are any questions that have come through as you've gone through this.
Thank you, Shujah and Harshit, for a wonderful presentation. I want to first remind everyone that you can continue to submit questions in our Q&A window to the right of the media player. We have a few here already. Here's our first question. How will the next generation of connected multimodal AI agents transform healthcare delivery from ambient clinical AI that supports physicians in real time to autonomous agents managing end-to-end patient journeys or regulatory submissions? And what leadership mindset shift is needed for CTOs and CIOs to move from AI initiatives to AI native enterprises?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lot of thoughts. I can go out for next 3 days. Shujah, anything you want to highlight? I can provide 1 or 2 examples as well.
I'd let you respond to this, Harshit, and I'll add my thoughts.
Yeah, so I think when we think about ambient listening as one of the solution has been or workflow has been there for a while, but as the requester called it out, that multimodality that now the foundational model supports is going to be very, very important part of it, right? I think Shujah briefly touched based on that, and I noticed that in my previous experience at Spring Health, if I am a therapist and what we had observed that 60% of their time was getting spent on taking the clinical notes and then selecting the right CPT code to get paid. When we think about how the Gen AI is going to change that, where they can spend most of their time doing what they are best at, providing the care, and then let the technology take care of creating the structured note for that. They can still have a human in the loop in terms of the review and approval, etc., but also reduce the back and forth that goes into getting paid, having the incorrect CPT code. So these are some of the examples where the summarization from voice to text, the summarization from text to actionable items, summarization from the image to interpreting that in terms of the variations that look like, all of those is going to be very, very important and that's where we spend time during today's discussion talking about the interoperability between these systems to support those connected workflows is going to be very important.
Yeah. I'll just add that, I think healthcare is, while it has been a slow adopter of technology for a variety of reasons, it is also in a somewhat unique position that the underlying data sharing mechanisms like HL7, DICOM, etc., are also relatively well implemented across the industry. So the ability to, and there is a structured representation to how this data is exchanged and consumed between different systems. That actually lends itself fairly well to when you look at agents talking to each other. There is a pre-existing framework that can be used to accelerate rapid modernization of this environment. And that's actually a big area of focus for us at CitiusTech, where we look at some of the emerging standards on the technology side, like MCP, as Harshit mentioned, and how does that intersect with interoperability standards today. And I think that will be a key enabler in creating multi-agent workflows. The second part, which Harshit also mentioned, is the benefit of the clinical scribe example. This is actually shaping both provider and patient experiences as an outcome. Providers are spending more time interacting with patients, they're spending less time doing operational work. Patients are now working with providers who are actually able to engage with them further instead of having to take notes which need to be updated on the screen. And I think as a whole, if you are able to create better experiences, that leads to increased demand for adoption, right? So I think that whole end-to-end workflow, being able to capture the end user experience and having that shape the overall patient experience, in addition to obviously the productivity benefits you will see, is going to play an important role in the amount of trust and the demand that you're going to see for some of these agents going forward.
Yes, completely agree.
Terrific. And here's our next question. Given that healthcare data is fragmented across modalities, clinical notes, imaging, wearables, claims, and genomics, what governance and normalization approaches are proving most effective in enabling multimodal AI agents to operate safely and to deliver measurable clinical or operational outcomes?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, in my hat, both as a CTO and also being responsible for InfoSec compliance at Kyruus Health, this keeps me up at the night, right? For various reasons. The normalizations, tagging of the data, having the logical isolations, having the least privilege used on the data is the norm with and without advent of Gen AI. But it becomes even more important now and going forward. We talked about agents doing the work on behalf of a human. So how does the attribution happens when XYZ action is being kind of taken? What happens that inadvertently, not with a bad intention, but inadvertently, there is a bug in your automation or agentic workflow that is creating set of output or the actions which are going to be impactful for the care that is intended to be delivered as well. So building those checks and balances are going to be very, very important. We are already observing that while the government and regulatory landscape is changing, certain security and compliance standard, whether it is NIST or otherwise, are also rapidly evolving to provide a framework and guardrail around those. Just like any organization going through their HIPAA compliance or SOC 2 Type 2 and Type 2 compliance and high trust compliance, there is going to be a world where if they have AI-centric product and features, they will be expected to meet XYZ AI-centric compliance standard as well. And that will be a good thing. That will be a good thing without adding undue kind of process for everybody to not only have the trust, but adhere to the common set of baseline standards as well. So yeah, I mean, it is changing, and data from wearables to sensors is rapidly increasing in healthcare specifically. So I think this should be on top of the mind for everybody.
I think one of the challenges that we also are seeing, right, is where data is coming from is also rapidly evolving, right? So earlier, a lot of healthcare decision making was primarily diagnostic, right? You used to rely on clinical data, which is also somewhat static in nature, right? You didn't have real-time clinical data feeds coming in. Now there is an expectation that you need to be able to monitor devices for predictive maintenance. So there is telemetry data coming in from devices. One of the other trends we're seeing is wearables becoming much more common in home-based care settings, especially for chronic condition management, as well as now starting to see consumer devices like Apple Watch or AirPods being approved as medical grade devices.
Yes.
So the framework that needs to be built is one, how do you create a scalable infrastructure that is not only working with the data sources today, but can be scaled to support incremental data sources in the future. And one aspect of it is real-time data with different formats, etc., that are coming in. And then you've got genomics data, which is also now becoming much more mainstream, which is again data at a completely different scale, right? So the volume of data that has to be processed goes up exponentially. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to build, to emphasize on while we are building problem solutions for healthcare as it's shaped today. Going forward, one of the big drivers is also going to be how do you anticipate and handle these type of requirements as they're coming in tomorrow, because the volume of data and the number of data sources is only going to grow,
Yes.
right, as we grow forward. So that's another
Yeah.
thought I wanted to kind of share on this.
Oh, that's a very important point, Shujah. I think I will also shout out CitiusTech for their partnership with Kyruus Health. Their expertise in the healthcare domain, having worked for multi-years in the healthcare data, was one of the core reasons we kind of partner with them. Again, Shujah didn't pay me to have the shout out, but just calling it out that it was an important aspect for the partnership as well. And then we are benefiting from that knowledge.
No, thank you, Harshit. Kyruus Health has been a great partner to us as well. So really appreciate that.
Wonderful. Let's get time for one more question. Once an AI agent is validated in the lab, what are the practical challenges of monitoring, retraining, and versioning it in production? And how are organizations evolving their MLOps pipelines to support continuous feedback, drift detection, and lifecycle management across diverse healthcare environments like EHR, RCM, and medical devices?
Yeah, this is such an important question because not many people are already thinking about it because adoption and the usage at the production scale workflow are still in the infancy part of it. But soon it is going to be an important aspect for various reasons. The cost structure is changing, right? When we think about, we talked about GitHub Copilot, right? Like when we think about the pricing model is per seat per month kind of at this point of time, but the usage mileage kind of vary depending on the adoption curve your organization might be having. Similarly, the underlying infrastructure, whether it is GPU, whether it is compute resources, we are seeing that, hey, it's costly right now, but it's going to continue to bend the cost curve and become more and more optimized. So what is important to have the right set of instrumentation, having the metrics to kind of measure it, having the expertise within your team, whether it is cloud infrastructure or otherwise, who understands the norms of this, and then setting up the rhythm. Like at Kyruus Health, we use off-the-shelf commercial infrastructure as a code solution, which allows us to pay close attention to our cost curve. And then we take a definitive set of goals in terms of optimizing it so it doesn't become a runaway cost for us, right? So I think this is an important part of it. And then the other aspect of it, which is also important, where I don't see yet a good set of product thought leadership on how do you price your solution. Because while you have underlying infrastructure cost, you also need to think about if you are for-profit organization and you need to think about the pricing for your solution for your customer base. How do you translate that? So I do expect more evolution on the pricing model. Traditional SaaS to the AI centric product is going to happen in next coming months.
That's fantastic, Harshit. Thank you for sharing that. The only other maybe data point I'll add is, there is, as you went through the AI evolution, there was guidance that was gradually put out by regulatory bodies like the FDA, where they mentioned frameworks like total product lifecycle management, and now there's the predetermined change control plan. So there's also a lot of guidance that can be taken. And these are essentially also best practices that can be implemented as a part of your production monitoring workflows. And we expect this to continue to evolve. So as a part of the investment into the AI infrastructure, one of the recommendations that we also make is to continue to have one eye on emerging trends on which are coming in through regulatory bodies, and also the ability to participate during the public comment phase, etc., if there is a point of view you'd like to share.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you that the learning has to be a constant exercise, and especially in a very rapidly evolving space like Gen AI. So having the right pluggability into how the standards are evolving, regulatory standards as well as guidance are evolving has to be part of the operating model for any leaders as well. So completely agree with you, Shujah.
At this time, we do have to wrap up. Thanks again to Harshit and Shujah for all of your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thanks to HIMSS for giving us this forum.
And once again, we want to thank our sponsor, CitiusTech, for their support of this webinar. For our audience, don't forget to take our brief evaluation at the end of today's event and share your thoughts with us. As a reminder, you'll receive an email within 24 hours to re-watch the on-demand recording of today's event, and it'll be available in the HIMSS Resource Hub for a limited time, so feel free to come back and watch it anytime. Thanks, everyone, and have a terrific rest of your day.